There we are, we'll kick off then. So yes, pronounced good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our NAHT briefing for members and non-members within the school settings. I'm extremely pleased to welcome this afternoon Minister for Education, Kirsty Williams, Deputy Director for Operations of School, Ruth Conway, and Director for NAHT, Laura Dole. I'm pleased to confirm that we have 312 people registered and attending this webinar. My name is Laura Tams and I'm an organiser here at NAHT Cymru, Wales. I will be facilitating the event this afternoon. So I'm pleased to confirm that this event is being simultaneously translated into Welsh. So if you would like to listen in Welsh, then please click at the bottom screen. You will need to choose the option Chinese, and we do apologise, but unfortunately Welsh is not yet available on Zoom. But I can assure you that Stefan is there and he's translating as I speak. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all the attendees and to thank you for all your questions that you have submitted in advance. And we will work down these time permitting. As you would imagine, we've been inundated with questions, but we will do our best to get as many in as we can. If you would like to ask a question of your own, just in case there is time to do so, then please add this into the chat function. Please use the question option. The chat option is for if you're having any technical difficulties. My colleague Alice will be making herself known to you all soon, and she will be on hand to assist this evening with any problems you have. And please make sure you select everyone when entering your comments there. During the broadcast, I will be drawing your attention to a poll. And if you would like to tweet or mention this on any social media, the hashtag for this evening is Cymru COVID School Response. We will be recording this afternoon's webinar, and this will be available on our website within the next day or so. So I'd now like to pass you over to Laura Dole, NAHT's Director, to officially welcome you.
Thanks, Laura. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Well, it's certainly been a testing few weeks back in school following the summer break. Many of you have had to deal with the impact of children and staff displaying COVID symptoms, self-isolating and testing positive for the virus. This has resulted in staff shortages, supporting children with home learning and having to deal with some of the concerns of parents. Let's not forget that this is not what you signed up for as head teachers. This is all outside your remit, your comfort zone, and in many ways outside your area of expertise. But you have rose to the challenge. You are there for your staff, your learners and your parents. You are continuing to support the national effort against coronavirus, and for that, we are all immensely proud of you. NAHT Cymru recognises the pressures you are under. I recognise what you're up against. The Wales team has spent the last few weeks talking to members, listening to their concerns, so I am able to represent you and lobby on your behalf. So, what have we been up to since schools reopened their doors? Well, we are working with the Welsh Government and local authorities on expectations on head teachers. School leaders should not feel that they are constantly on standby, waiting for a call regarding a COVID case at their school. We are working with the TTP team and local authorities and are seeing a more refined system in place to ease the pressure on schools and LA staff. Where it's not working, we are challenging this. I know many of you want to be notified, want to be able to deal with things as and when they happen. In some respects, you are your own worst enemies, but that is why your union is here to protect you. Working at this level of intensity is not sustainable. I know many of you are feeling the pressures to get your breakfast clubs up and running, and I know we have a question for the Minister on this issue. Our message to you has been clear. Do what you can within the bounds of a risk assessment. You can do no more than that, and your union is here to support you with this. What are your priorities at the moment as a head teacher? Should you be working on school development plans? Should your focus be on developing the new curriculum? And what about standards? Again, we are working with the Welsh Government to give schools a list, a guide. What needs to be done and what can be put on hold while you deal with the operational issues at your school? This union is calling for this on your behalf to help you prioritise what must be done and to protect you from any repercussions. How many of you are in deficit at your school? How many of you on this call this afternoon are worried about deficit budgets and what it will mean? We hear you, we hear your anxiety, and we are here for you. The Welsh Government has listened to your concerns over Teachers' Pay Award and the uplift that they have provided will help you in terms of setting your budgets. The extra £5.5 million in the system will support you with this, and this is a positive step. This is recognition of what you as school leaders have been saying, but there is still so much to be done, challenging conversations ahead, and it is only by raising your concerns, lobbying on funding reform, and getting this message out that schools need the help, we can really instigate change. In the spirit of working together and supporting you and your schools, Education Minister Kirsty Williams has joined us this afternoon. Over the last few months, NAHT has worked alongside the Minister to help overcome the obstacles you face. And although at times our views are far apart, our methodology and our actions are also far apart, our focus remains on keeping schools safe and secure for learners. We are only going to succeed by working together and being honest in our views. And to that end, I'm going to hand back to Laura so that we can begin this session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. I'll waste no time and we'll go straight into questions if that's acceptable to the Minister. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. So this question is in relation to free school meals, and it says, following Welsh Government's announcement today, can school settings please be given reassurance from the Minister that the responsibility to manage this will not fall to school?
Well, first of all, I hope your members are pleased with the announcement today. So that's £11 million extra for free school meal pupils, which will provide free school meals in the school holidays up to and including Easter. And £700,000 will be made available to the further education colleges so that they can provide similar support to their learners. It is likely that the same methods for delivery that were established over Easter, Whitsun and summer and the first 2 weeks of this academic year will be used by local authorities. They were given prior notice of the government's intention to support FSM pupils in this way so that they could gear up their systems to respond positively to it. Your members will know that local authorities have sometimes different systems in place, but they are best placed to understand what is the most effective way of supporting families in this time. The vast majority of them either use a voucher system or a BACS payment system. But as I said, local authorities were given advanced warning of the intention of the Welsh Government to support families in this way, and we would expect them to utilise their usual methods of support supporting families as they did in the, as I said, in the previous holidays where we have been able to provide support to these children.
Thank you. Thank you. So the next question is in relation to Estyn and the consortia. Please would the Minister consider repurposing Estyn and consortia so that they can send their staff out to help on the front line with track and trace and all the admin around letters, phone calls, spreadsheets, etc. Head teachers and local authority officers are working flat out at the moment, and extra bodies on the ground would help enormously. No inspection, thematic or otherwise, is going to help anything at the time. But the skills of these people could make a real difference now. Estyn and consortia staff could take time off in lieu or weekends worked, head teachers cannot.
Okay, well, I think it's important to recognise that both Estyn and regions continue to do an important piece of work. With regards to the regions, they have been helping to support schools and to provide a framework for enhanced blended learning and to coordinate collaborative efforts across the system to get us in a better place to face the challenges that undoubtedly lie ahead of us in the months to come. With regards to Estyn, again, there is work that they need to do, and one of the things that we want them to do at the moment is to understand the support that is being given to individual schools. That's partly as a response to calls from education unions who have said that they have been dissatisfied with the inconsistent levels of support schools receive across Wales. So in response to those calls for wanting there to be a more coherent and a level playing field and the types of support the local authorities are giving to individual schools, we've asked Estyn to do that so that we can have some reassurance and that we can those local authorities that are doing it well, we can learn the lessons of that and to make sure that other local authorities that are struggling can't. But clearly, we continue to look at what can be stepped down at this particular time, and what else we can expect Estyn and the regional consortia to do, especially when it comes to looking at reducing bureaucracy and workload for those that are on the front line.
Thank you. Hot topic at the moment is breakfast clubs, and that's the next question. So schools' current priority is to remain open for all pupils, and in order to do this, schools are operating within Welsh Government's own guidance and the bounds of a risk assessment. Schools have tried to factor in reopening breakfast club within these boundaries, but simply cannot do this, or some cannot do this. Why, therefore, is Welsh Government insisting that all schools must provide a breakfast club service when it is clear that to do so would be bursting all class bubbles and therefore increasing the risk of COVID spread?
Well, first of all, I want to recognise that many schools have been successful in reopening their breakfast club provision, because they understand how important that is to the children and the parents in their cohort, and have been able to do that successfully. Where primary schools ran a free school breakfast clubs prior to the COVID-19 outbreak, there is a legal duty to provide that free school breakfast. Now, clearly that does have to be done in conjunction with the operational guidance and risk assessments, which undoubtedly makes it more complicated to do, but nothing about COVID-19 is simple, is it? So, this is an important part of our offer to young people and families. And as I said, if there are particular parts of the organisational guidance that make it absolutely impossible within a setting, and it is unreasonable for the school to provide that service, then that is allowed for. But there is a legal duty to get those services up and running, and many schools have successfully done that. Indeed, I'm absolutely amazed by the capacity of some schools. I spoke to a head teacher yesterday that has not only got breakfast clubs up and running, but a lot of the family support systems that school used to provide prior to COVID, those are back up and running as well, because in supporting parents in that way is a really, really important way of supporting children in that school. So I'm amazed, at the ability of schools to work in different ways, yes, but to get back as far as possible as they can within the confines of health and safety and the operational guidance, not only to doing the day-to-day running of schools, but actually being able to put on all those additional support systems that have kept children and families going prior to COVID. And it's amazing to me that many people have been able to do that, but it is a legal requirement.
Thank you. The next one is around expectations on school settings. We are hearing mixed reports around what is and is not expected of school settings at this time. Can you commit to working with local authorities, Estyn and consortia, to provide a checklist of expectations to schools as soon as possible so that we can focus on what must be done? And I suppose this kind of links in, Minister, with the last question on mixed reports of what is expected and what isn't. So this question is asking for a checklist of expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very happy to commit to doing something like that and to improving the communication. So we're all absolutely clear, what has been stepped back from and stepped down from. So starting with the expectations of the Welsh Government, making sure that we've got our house in order, and then having conversations then with local authorities and regional consortia about what is reasonable and what the priorities are at this time. So we've already done a lot of that, and we need to make sure that that's properly communicated so that staff are absolutely clear about what is happening and what's not happening, but very happy to give a commitment to continuing to work so that there is absolute clarity. So, we've taken lots of steps, and the most obvious one being categorisation, again, has gone for this academic year. So, but clearly we need to work harder to make sure that everybody's aware of what isn't required this year and what the priorities are. Now, local authorities are their own masters in that regard, but certainly from a Welsh Government perspective and working with the regional consortia, we can be absolutely clear about what's expected at this time and what can be left to another day.
Thank you. I'll just bring Laura in if I can, please.
Yeah, thank you, Minister, and thank you for making that commitment. I know that will be reassuring to certainly many of our members who are having those conversations with local authorities on what should we prioritise and what shouldn't we prioritise. I'd just like to take us back a step, if I could, to the issue of breakfast clubs. And I know we've had conversations with your team around this, and of course I don't think there's anybody on the call that wouldn't or doesn't want to be able to put on a breakfast club. Not only do they not understand the importance that support it is for vulnerable families, and although breakfast clubs were not intended to be a childcare support mechanism for everyone, we appreciate that that's what it's become in some circumstances, and that it adds a value. It has a value to those families as well. I think schools have that commitment to support the wider community. Having said that, there is some real concerns amongst our members about this statutory obligation to put on breakfast clubs. I've had a lot of conversations with our members who are really, really worried about the fact that they cannot do it within the confines of a risk assessment, and that they are looking at alternative options. Now, some of those conversations are between schools and local authorities, but what I would kind of like to try and explore, possibly with your help, is looking at what those alternatives might look like, because our members are certainly not saying, look, it can't happen, I can't do it, and that's the end of it. What we're hearing a lot of is, I can't do it, but can somebody help? Because we really want to be able to do something. Now, whether or not that means bringing in additional staff so that breakfast clubs can be put on in a classroom setting to protect the bubbles, whether or not that's utilising neighbouring local authority buildings that are maybe larger, that are able to accommodate more children. Those are the kinds of conversations that I'm having with the members. There's no one that's saying, I'm not doing it, and to be honest, it's not on my list of priorities. It's very much on the list of priorities, because of course they recognise it puts additional strain on families. So I suppose it's, how do we have that wider conversation so that it isn't just a statutory requirement on schools and that's it?
Well, I agree, Laura. I think, innovative practice has become the hallmark of getting ourselves through this COVID crisis, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, if there are different ways in which we can deliver that service or organise that service, then clearly, we're more than happy to have those conversations about it. So, as you said, innovative ways of delivering it or how it can be safeguarded going forward are absolutely conversations that we're willing to have. But it is an important part of our offer to children and families. But clearly, finding a way of delivering it during this time. And I'm more than happy to convene something where your members and myself and representatives of the local authorities can discuss what the constraints are at this particular moment that is preventing some schools from being able to feel confident in offering that service.
That's great. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you both. Just looking at the questions and answers, and it is in relation to breakfast clubs. There are some schools that that are operating clubs but can't to full capacity, and they are having issues around who decides which parents get it. So not really for a response, Minister, but just for you to be aware that that there are operational issues around running the ones that are open as well. It would be remiss for me to ignore our members on that.
And if we established a round table, I mean, we can explore some of those issues.
Thank you. The next one is on flu vaccinations, and this one says, I'm aware of the Welsh Government's announcement to make available the flu vaccine to additional age cohorts, but does the Minister accept that all staff within a school setting should have been made a priority for the vaccine this year? And are there any provisions for this to happen? Local health board nurses are visiting the school setting, so it would make sense, and it would be prudent to extend the vaccine to all school staff, given the difficulties school settings are presently under and the need to keep schools open.
Well, certainly flu vaccines are really important this year, and making sure that children who are eligible get them is particularly important. As your questioner has said, the programme has been extended down to those to the age of 50. When it comes to vaccines, actually the advice on who gets them is kind of taken out of politicians' hands in the sense, and we are guided by the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation. So they've made the recommendations and we're carrying out those recommendations. I'm more than happy to have a conversation with the Health Minister about whether there is scope for going above and beyond. But I have to say, in terms of availability of vaccine, you know, it's going to be a push to get it out to those 50 and over. But I'm more than happy to raise that question with the Health Minister to see if there's any more capacity to extend categories of those that are eligible.
Thank you for that commitment. Thank you. The next question is around the new curriculum, and the question is, will there be any delay in implementation of the new curriculum as a result of the unprecedented times that we are currently facing?
Sure. Well, you know, without a shadow of a doubt, I'd much rather be introducing a new curriculum and asking schools to engage in it when we weren't in the middle of a pandemic. That certainly would be easier. At this stage, we're looking to continue with the original timescales. This week we've published an updated action plan setting out next steps in the reform journey. So it's kind of national mission point 2, reflecting on what progress has been made on implementing the mission and where we go next. We are also publishing and setting out a shared expectations document. So, you know, how do we actually realise the curriculum for practitioners? Now, it doesn't require immediate action, but it does provide, you know, the direction of travel towards curriculum reform. So, you know, we'll keep that situation under review. Again, different practitioners are doing different things. So, again, you know, I speak to head teachers every week, and we always ask about the curriculum and ask people's views. And again, yesterday, the head teachers that I engaged with, so that was one Welsh medium high school, they're pushing ahead with some of the projects that they had planned. I spoke to a large primary school in a very deprived area, and the words were, well, with the consortia off my back and categorisation gone this year, this is the year for us to make mistakes. So actually we're pushing on with our engagement in the curriculum because we feel a sense of freedom that nobody's watching us this year in that sense. So different practitioners are, you know, still feeling able to engage, but clearly the whole spirit of the curriculum is around co-construction, and we will continue to engage with practitioners to see whether the timescales are realistic. But again, in all the conversations that we have, we check in, and many head teachers talk with great enthusiasm of how they are, you know, embracing, even with all the other challenges, the new curriculum, you know. And I see this in my daughter's own school, where, you know, the curriculum this year, you know, is being formed around the areas of learning and experience. And it's really, as I said, it's really impressive that even with all the challenges at the moment, space is still being found to think of innovation and different ways of making some progress. Clearly, some of the challenges around professional learning are really difficult. So that's the bit that, you know, is concerning to me, is, you know, the time and the energy and the bandwidth for practitioners to engage in some of that professional learning, because everything is so pressurized at the moment. So I absolutely, you know, accept that that's where there's a real challenge in creating that space at the moment. So we need to keep it under review.
Thank you for that. Can I bring Laura in, please?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Thank you, Minister. You kind of at the tail end of that answered my question that I was going to pose around that kind of that pressure when it comes to professional learning, because I think it's fair to say that certainly the appetite for curriculum reform remains strong, but it's just the ability then, given the current demands and constraints on the system, of whether the kind of the time scale is realistic. It's refreshing to hear from you that that it's actually under review, because I think that is what we would kind of look for. Obviously, we don't know how the pandemic is going to go. We don't know how that's going to affect schools in the long term. I think all we would ask for is that kind of commitment to review where we are, so that although the appetite is there for curriculum reform, there isn't this how can I put it, desire that it must happen, you know, come hell or high water, that there is a realistic expectation of, although that's what we are all aiming for, that they would, you know, if there is significant pressure in the system, that is realised, and that it's responded to accordingly.
Thank you both. This one is very timely actually, and it's asking, is there any news on the proposed circuit break, and will school settings be closing for longer than 1 week for half term?
Clearly the government is considering a circuit break, and whether that is necessary at this particular point to help contain and drive back infection rates that we're currently seeing at the moment. So that is, you know, being discussed. Of course, what that means for education is being discussed as part of that. With regards to implementing a circuit break, when clearly it makes sense to do that around a time when schools are off for half term, because that limits the impact on education. Clearly, 3 local authorities will begin a 2-week half term at the end of this week. So obviously schools in Powys, Conway and Pembrokeshire do have a 2-week half term, as I said, which begins this week, which was agreed last summer. But we'll want to communicate with education as quickly as we can, should a decision to be made to introduce a circuit breaker in Wales, and to be clear what that does mean for education. But, you know, throughout this pandemic, we have looked to maximise educational opportunities and minimise disruption as a result of COVID-19. And the government has clearly said throughout the pandemic that keeping education open is a priority.
Thank you for that, and for the commitment in informing school settings as soon as you can. The next question is around Accelerated Learning Fund, and it reads, we know that schools are struggling to recruit staff on a part-time basis, especially if the amount of money the school has been allocated is low. NAHT Cymru has called for schools to be given some freedom on how best to use the money allocated to them, and not ring-fence the cash just for additional staff. Is this something the government will now consider, given that schools are not being able to use the money on staffing?
First of all, you know, the principles that underpin the grant are very clear, I hope, to everybody. We don't want to place restrictions on head teachers in how they go about appointing and deploying the new capacity. So the guidance is very clear that it can schools can appoint teachers, teaching assistants and other roles that a head teacher would see fit to being appropriate to support children at that time, whether that's coaching, youth workers, mentors. The capacity can indeed be full-time, part-time. New staff can work across more than one setting. So a school could work in partnership with another school to deploy those resources. So, you know, we're looking to be as flexible as we can, and you know, again, we're talking to schools who are successfully recruiting staff at this particular moment, and we want to be as flexible as we can. But, you know, the grant is there for a reason. I'm accountable to the Finance Minister, and I'm accountable to the Senedd for the appropriate use of those resources, and we were very clear what those resources were from, and therefore, you know, we want to see them used, you know, for that purpose, because just like you're accountable, I'm accountable, and people will ask me, what's that money being spent on?
Thank you. The next question is around the Estyn review, and it's quite lengthy, but it talks about you have commissioned a therapeutic review on the support that LAs and consortia have given schools during the pandemic. NAHT Cymru has challenged this review on a number of points, namely that the review is tying up local authority staff who are supporting schools. The review will not be published until January, so what use will it be of then? Head teachers are being asked to take part in meetings via Teams when they are clearly tied up with the operational challenges of being in school. Does the Welsh Government think that this is going to be a valuable use of resources and time, given that NAHT Cymru has already flagged up with officials and Estyn that the consortia are handing out crib sheets to schools on how to answer the questions, and local authorities have had a hand in picking the schools being questioned? Sorry for the length of that one.
Well, if consortia are indeed doing that, then that's highly, I have to say, I would regard that as highly unprofessional and really, really disappointing. So as I said in answer to the earlier question, I have sat in countless meetings, both official ones with union reps, and I've listened to countless head teachers who have complained to me about the disparity in services that are available to individual schools, depending on the individual local authority that you are in and the individual consortia that you're in. So if that is a problem, then we need to take action to sort that problem out. And it has been told to me on numerous occasions that is a problem. So also, members of the Senedd and members of the CYP committee have also received complaints about different levels of support and you know, within the education setting. So we can't then ignore it. If that's been brought to our table as a problem, then we can't ignore it. We need to do something about it. So asking Estyn to look at the levels of support and the appropriateness of the support that have been offered to individual schools is an important piece of work. The reason why it's coming out in January is because we have listened to concerns, and given the fact that people were bedding down and dealing with the first couple of weeks of the academic year, we were asked to push the review out. So we've listened to that, and that's why it's January. So it seems I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't. So, you know, people say, please move the report, please give us a bit more time. So we've given you a bit more time. And then the criticism is, well, it's not coming till January now. What's the point? So, you know, you try to listen, you try to take people's views on board, and then you are criticised for the, you know, for the outcome of taking those views on board. I think it's a valuable piece of work. I think we need to know which local authorities are doing this well, and where the local authorities perhaps could do better. No individual local authority, let alone an individual school, is going to be named or shamed in this report. Each individual local authority will receive a private feedback from Estyn, and what I will receive is a State of the Nation report. So it is absolutely, so if your members are using the crib sheet, it's an absolutely pointless exercise, I would agree, because this is an opportunity for your members to be absolutely clear with Estyn about what is working for them and what is not working for them, and how we can make sure that going forward, it can work better. So by all means, use the crib sheet, but the opportunity that you will have to have your concerns listened to will be lost. It will be lost. So this isn't about judging individual schools. It is about making sure that wherever you are as a head teacher, you have an LEA and a consortia that is helping you do the right things and is supporting you at this unprecedented time. And I think that's a piece of work worth doing.
Thank you. I'll pass to Laura, please.
Thanks, Laura. I mean, I smile because the Minister is too polite to say that when she's talking about those people who have raised the concerns, I am one of the people that has been in those meetings with her and her officials talking about inconsistencies in approach. I think where our concerns come in, and I think it's fair to say actually that during the conversations that we've had with Estyn over the last week, some of those concerns have been put to bed, shall we say. It's been around the kind of the rollout of the review. So it was not made clear to our members that meetings with Estyn were not compulsory, and that was a concern to us. So when members had phone calls to say, Estyn, we're Estyn and we want to have a meeting with you, they thought that they had to have a meeting with them. I think there are some historical issues that are coming into play in terms of certainly trust deficit that there exists between certain members in the profession and Estyn itself. And I think that has probably played a part in our members' anxiety of when you have the phone call to say that this is happening, what does that mean? I think I'm prepared to say, and I said this to Myla Rowlands last week in a conversation, if you don't want people to be anxious about the questions that you're going to ask them, provide them with the questions beforehand. Estyn inspectors were contacting schools but refusing to send the questions, which sent anxiety levels through the roof, when if they'd had the questions beforehand, they would have been prepared, maybe in a better frame of mind to answer the questions, because there wasn't that anxiety as to, I don't actually know what this is about. So there has been some communication issues with Estyn that we have cleared up, I think, in the last few days. We continue to encourage our members to take part in the survey that you've mentioned, Minister, because I think it is vitally important that you know exactly what's going on and that you have an honest appraisal of the situation. Our concerns come in around the method of which you get that information, given the tack that was being taken by Estyn at the time, which was not to provide the questions to schools, so that made them anxious. By going to local authorities and asking, what the situation is with these schools, and we know that they were, local authorities that looked at the list of schools and said, yeah, don't go to that one, go to this one, because they know that they've picked some schools that would look more favourably on the local authority than others, and I think that is where a lot of our concern came in, and I'm pleased to say that conversations with your officials and Estyn has alleviated some of those concerns. And again, like I said, we encourage members to take part in the anonymous survey to make sure that there is an accurate reflection of what's going on.
Thank you, Laura. The next question is around pay rise for teachers, and it asks, will there be revenue directly from the Welsh Government to pay for the pay rise, or will schools have to source this from their ever decreasing revenue?
Well, as Laura mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, in excess of £5 million has been made available to local authorities, which has been ring-fenced specifically to assist in implementing any pay rise. So, hopefully that resource will, my expectation is that resource is made available to schools. And we will also be making additional resources available for those schools with sixth forms, because, but believe it or not, that comes from a different pot of money, but there's additional resources for sixth forms as well.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, just wanted to come back in on that, because that's obviously something that that we called for when first round of pay discussions were announced, and it is refreshing to hear that the government has listened to the calls of our members. I suppose my question is, and I proceed with cautious optimism with this question, so do we know if that is enough money? And my second point of the question was going to be, is it going to be ring fenced for this purpose? But the minister has already answered that question. So are you able to confirm, Minister, if that is enough money that's going to make up the funding shortfall between what has already been budgeted for and what hasn't?
Certainly the gap has been agreed between ourselves and the employers, the local authority. So I guess if they were dissatisfied, they would have let us know by now.
Thank you both. And the next one is in relation to learning walks, and it says that our members are facing challenges in some areas, particularly from teaching unions, on the need to carry out learning walks. Can you give some clarity on this, please, Minister? Can we do them if they are properly risk assessed? If we don't, where will this leave head teachers further down the line when they are not able to evidence the quality of learning within their school setting?
Okay, can I just say, one of the things that does concern me at the moment is making sure that we maintain distance between people whilst inside schools. And, you know, at the beginning, even before some of the children were even back in schools, we did have, you know, some staff having to self-isolate because of not maintaining social distancing between adults. And I think, you know, it's so easy, isn't it, to fall into that trap you know, so the first thing to remind everybody is to try and keep people 2 meters distant from each other and from learners as much as possible, recognizing with very young children that's a real challenge. So learning walks are acceptable as long as they can be managed, you know, in that way, maintaining that social distance. So there's no reason why they can't happen as long as they're properly risk assessed and that social distancing is maintained.
Hang on, you're on mute, Laura.
My apologies, something had to go wrong, didn't it? Right, I understand that the Minister's committed to making a decision on centred assessed grades prior to half term, but can we please request that school settings are given the courtesy of being told that the decision will be taken prior to this being in the public domain? The question goes on to say that in March, school settings were receiving calls from concerned parents that had seen the news breaking and that school staff weren't aware of this in advance. So I suppose this question is around, can we have some assurances from the Minister that should the exams be changed or cancelled, that school settings will be made aware of this before media and parents?
Sure. So as everybody will be more than aware, I am looking to make a decision on the future of the 2021 series once I have received an interim report from the independent review panel chaired by Louise Casella. She is committed to doing that by the 31st of October, and there are 2 important principles. First, to make a decision while children are attending school, and not to do that actually during the half-term break, because I think it's really important, and I've received representations from head teachers who think it's important that that decision is taken during term time, so those conversations can be had between teachers and pupils, so teachers can explain the consequences rather than that decision being made while children are out of school and therefore are anxious and they have to wait to come into school to receive some reassurance and to receive any explanations that the teachers would want to give. So yes, I take the points on board. As I said, we're looking, the review will be made available to me by the 31st, and we will look to make an announcement as quickly as possible after that, but being mindful that we need to do that while children are in school, and also being mindful to do that we communicate that to schools prior to making a statement either in the Senedd or anywhere else.
Thank you. I'm just conscious of time, so I'm just scrolling down to see which ones we've had the most in relation to. This one is quite lengthy, and it's about the pressures on school at the moment, and it says, as a head teacher of a large primary school, I'm finding it increasingly more difficult to rely on the goodwill of my staff to cover staggered starts, lunch and finishing time. These same staff are spending all day, every day with their classes, shortening their own lunch covers for break. PPA then consists of planning and preparing work for school, and also for those who are at home self-isolating, as well as providing cover within the PPA for staff who are off. The blended learning programme has technically doubled the workload of my staff, as online learning needs to be adjusted to allow independent learning. We desperately want to keep schools open for our pupils, but staff are at breaking point, and I'm not sure how longer I can rely on their goodwill. In the medium term, please will the Minister have a look at the whole nation of duty of care as it applies to head teachers. As brilliant as my chair of governors is, and many governors are, no one can exercise any duty of care in a meaningful way unless they have some proper control over the workload. Governors don't have this power and therefore cannot exercise any duty of care, no matter how hard they try or they care. So the question is, what real support has the Education Minister planned for our schools?
Well, as I said in answer to questions earlier, first of all, we do recognise the immense pressure that schools are under at the moment, and that's why we have looked to take away, where at all possible, requirements of schools that aren't a priority at this moment, and we are committed to continuing to review that, so that schools can concentrate on things that are particularly important at this moment. We've made financial resources available for the recruitment of additional staff, but there aren't any easy options at this moment. It is incredibly challenging, and I wish I could tell you when that will get any easier. But unfortunately, once the pandemic is as it is going to be a challenging time. So that's why, as I said, we continue to look to see what we can take off schools and school leaders. And we have made some money available to provide mental health and wellbeing support to teachers at this time as well. So quite rightly, there's lots of attention paid to child mental health and wellbeing, and we've been able to find additional resources to help with that. But some of that financial resource is being deployed to try and provide mental health and wellbeing support to the profession itself, recognising, you know, that these are really stressful times for anybody that is working in the front line of the COVID response, and schools are certainly on the front line.
Thank you. The next one is in relation to Parents' Evening. And it's asking what are Welsh Government's minimum expectations on parents' consultations for the autumn term, and are school settings able to say no to face-to-face parental evenings?
Okay, well, due to current social distancing measures, we would recommend that traditional parents' evening and face-to-face open evenings do not take place at this time. Minimising contact with other human beings, as unnatural as that feels, is what we need to do wherever possible. But having said that, schools and colleges should try and ensure that they're available in some shape or form to be able to have those conversations with parents, whether that is by email or telephone, apps, you know, whatever is most appropriate for that individual schools. Where a discussion with a parent can't take place in those alternative routes and face-to-face was considered necessary, then that would need to be done observing all the social distancing rules. In relation to open evenings, then again, we would absolutely recommend that they were done virtually if they were being, and different strategies were employed. I spoke to the head teacher at Ysgol Brodir yesterday, and they had successfully held their parents' evening remotely, just like this. And actually, it had gone very well. The feedback had been very positive, and they wonder whether they'll ever go back to a more traditional way of engaging with parents. So again, you know, sometimes innovative practice perhaps will take us forward and change the way we do things in the future. But certainly, where at all possible, we should be minimising the number of adults and parents that are coming into school, and we should be looking at alternative ways of having that dialogue. And there's a number of ways in which I'm sure, you know, everybody is aware of that can happen.
That's lovely, thank you for that. The next one is in relation to pupils singing, and a head teacher that is trying to get clarity. We're being told that pupils cannot experience whole class singing. So really just asking what is the the Minister's view on this, as obviously singing can release feel-good chemicals, which are widely needed in a school setting. So yeah, just your view on singing as a whole in schools at the moment, please, Minister. Well,
advice from Public Health Wales is that there could be additional risks where you have singing, chanting, shouting. So we need to be mindful of that, and to plan accordingly. So where at all possible, we have to balance the risks that we know happen from singing, as opposed to the harms of what happens if we don't allow children to sing. So a whole school choir, probably not a very good idea at the moment, but maybe some singing if the space allowed in a well-ventilated room. I'm particularly interested in the concept of singing for our very youngest children in early years, where we know that that singing is a really important pedagogical principle of helping children learn and acquire language and sounds and develops their oracy skills. So, clearly trying to do that, is a really important part of their learning. So again, it is about recognizing the risk and trying to mitigate it, and whether the risk of doing it outweighs the risk to those children of not doing it. So again, taking a balanced approach to it, but recognizing that singing activity does pose potentially additional risk.
Thank you. I'm trying to just sum up some of these questions because I'm very mindful of the time, and it's been so well submitted. This one is around TTP, and I'll summarise it as quickly as I can. But there's been recent guidance from the TTP in Public Health Wales saying that that children who are within 1 metre for more than a minute and 2 metres for more than 15 minutes should be the close contact. It says, how are schools going to be able to accurately decide on that? So this talks about how, I think we spoke earlier about the 2 metre rule and whether or not certain groups within schools should isolate. There seems to have been some guidance from PHW by the TTP team this week saying that only those who are within a 1 metre space, so that there seems to be confusion. I do apologise with how I'm trying to get this question across, but there seems to be some confusion on whether children, if a child from one class bubble is tested positive, the TTP team seem to be implying to schools now that only the children who have been within a metre of that individual pupil need to self-isolate. So I'm not sure if this would be a question you would be able to answer this evening, Minister, or if this is something that we need to put to the Health Minister.
Well, I'll do my best, and Ruth, who's on the call, can help me out if I've got it wrong. Yeah, those people that need to self-isolate are those that indeed are considered a close contact, and the definition for close contact are the ones that you've just described. So that is those people that have spent more than 15 minutes face-to-face contact within 2 metres, and a shorter period of time if they've been closer together. So what that is, that has always been, that hasn't changed. The definition of a close contact hasn't changed recently. It is about trying to make sure that we only ask pupils to self-isolate when they've been in close contact to minimise disruption. But Ruth, if you can help me out if I've got it wrong, but that's the purpose, is only asking those people to be off school that have been a close contact. Now that's easier to do in some settings than others, isn't it? Because if you've got small younger children who have been running around, and if they're new to the school, they might not know everybody. But if you've got older pupils who are sitting in a very traditional plan at the moment, you might have a much better idea about who the close contacts are. But it is about minimizing disruption and only sending those children home that are a close contact. But Ruth, if you're listening, perhaps if I've got it wrong, you can let me know.
I am listening, and that was absolutely spot on. That was, and it is about trying to minimize the number of learners who have to self-isolate. But for all the reasons you've said, we recognise that that's more challenging in some situations and others, depending on how the class is organised. So we do understand that.
Thanks, Ruth.
Thank you both. I'm afraid that time has probably got the better of us, so I'm going to, at this moment, just extend my thanks as facilitator to the Minister, Ruth and to Laura, and for all of you attendees that have joined us in this afternoon's event. Sincere apologies for those questions we didn't get to ask, but these will be fed through to Welsh Government, and we will look to reply individually as best we can. It'd be remiss of me not to take this opportunity to let attendees know that NAHT is here for you, for our members, so please get in touch if you require any support or advice. And for those of you this afternoon who are watching who are not members, then please visit our website where you'll find further details on how you can join. So I'm going to pass over to Laura now, who's just going to give some closing remarks. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. First of all, thank you, Minister, and your team for taking the time to speak to us this afternoon. You agree to appear on these question and answer sessions, knowing that you're going to face some really difficult questions. Yet you return time and again. Your openness and frankness is really appreciated, so thank you. So you as school leaders, and for those who are with this union, there's a lot of information to take in from this Q&A session. Some questions have been answered, and some questions may result in more questions. Now more than ever, it is important to feel that you are supported as school leaders. Our role as your union is to provide you with that support, that collective voice, and that strength of unity to make sure that your voice is heard. We are working behind the scenes on a great many items and a great many issues because you are working on the front line to support your learners, their families and communities. Your focus needs to be on the health and well-being of your staff, your pupils and yourself. So we'll pick up the rest. Many thanks for your time this afternoon, and as always, NAHT Cymru is on hand to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.